When will we see justice? I'll tell you what I've not seen. I've not seen any arrests from the revelations in the Epstein files, over 3 million documents describing horrible things, describing unspeakable things, so much of it redacted. Over 24 people have resigned, CEOs, members of government worldwide. But I haven't seen any arrests or investigations here in the United States from this Department of Justice. Prince Andrew, Duke of York, who has since been stripped of his royalty, his royal titles, due to his affiliation with Jeffrey Epstein, has been arrested. Peter Mandelson, who previously served as UK's ambassador to the United States, resigned in disgrace from United Kingdom's House of Lords and the Labour Party, and he's been arrested. Former Prime Minister of Norway, Torbjørn Jagland, has been charged. But we don't see any charges, arrests, or investigations in the United States. What do we see? We see our FBI director celebrating in the locker room at the Olympics overseas. It's fine to be proud of this country, but we should be proud of this country because we have a system of justice that works. And yet we do not. Who are the men that should be investigated? I'll name them right here. Leon Black. You don't even have to see past the redactions to see that this man needs to be investigated. Jess Staley, accused of terrible things. It's right there in the files. Why is he not being investigated? And Leslie Wexner. Why did the FBI list him as a co-conspirator in their own documents in a child sex trafficking case, and then tell him, according to him, that they had no questions for him? Why is that? Well, the Epstein Files Transparency Act requires the DOJ and the FBI to disclose to us their internal memos and emails about how they made those decisions, whether to prosecute or not prosecute. Yet they have not delivered those memos. And we still don't have the memos and documents and emails from 2008 to explain why Jeffrey Epstein was given such a light sentence in what would have been an open and shut case of child sex trafficking, which allowed him to go back and recommit these terrible crimes, create hundreds of more victims, and ensnare so many other people in his conspiracy. Where are those documents that describe those decisions? We need justice. We want the Department of Justice to get to work, and that's what they need to do now. Madam Speaker, I rise today to let the American people know that this government is under siege. All 3 branches of this government is under siege by lobbyists and lawyers from a German company named Bayer. They spent over $9 million lobbying the executive branch and the legislative branch so that they don't have to be liable for any damages that their herbicide causes, otherwise known as Roundup. And they're having some success. Now, they haven't had any success yet in this chamber to get that immunity. They've had some success in the state legislatures, which are also under siege, to get this immunity from liability. Look, the Constitution guarantees people a trial if they've been harmed. Why are we contemplating going against the Constitution? The Attorney General has opined favorably for this German company in front of the Supreme Court about getting rid of any liability that they should have for any damages. And the most recent thing that we've seen, the executive branch. By the way, the President's Chief of Staff and the President's Attorney General work for one of the biggest lobbying firms that's received hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars from Bayer. And maybe that's why we've seen an executive order that says that the production of this chemical from this German company is a national defense priority. And we know why they're doing that. It's to keep them from having any liability. Everybody in this country deserves their day in court. This is wrong. We shouldn't succumb to the lobbyists, not in the executive branch, not in the judicial branch, and certainly not here in Congress, and not in the state legislatures. but there's a lot of money at play. And I implore my colleagues to resist it and do not give them immunity. And I yield back.
There are moments in Congress when the speeches feel routine, rehearsed, forgettable. And then there are moments when someone stands up and says exactly what millions of Americans have been asking for years. When Representative Thomas Massie took the floor to talk about the Department of Justice and the Epstein files. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't diplomatic. It was blunt, pointed, and deeply uncomfortable. His central question was devastatingly simple. Where are the arrests? According to the disclosures, there are over 3 million documents tied to Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking network. 3 million pages describing exploitation, abuse, and a web of powerful connections. So much of it heavily redacted, so much of it hinting at names and relationships that extend far beyond the two people who have already faced consequences. And yet, in the United States, there have been no new high-profile arrests connected to those revelations. No sweeping investigations publicly announced, no dramatic accountability moment that matches the scale of the scandal. Massie reminded everyone watching that Congress created the Department of Justice. Congress funds it. Congress oversees it. And if that's true, then Congress has every right, and arguably the obligation, to ask why justice appears stalled. He pointed out that, internationally, consequences have unfolded. Titles stripped, resignations, charges, careers dismantled abroad. But in the United States, the public perception is that the system has barely moved. Then he did something many lawmakers avoid. He named names: Leon Black, Jess Staley, Leslie Wexner. These are not fringe figures. They are individuals whose names have appeared in connection with Epstein in various investigative contexts. Massie questioned why there has been no visible investigative momentum involving them. He raised the contradiction of internal FBI documents referencing certain individuals while reportedly signaling that no further questions were necessary. That disconnect fuels suspicion. Importantly, Massie did not claim guilt. He did not deliver verdicts. Instead, he questioned process. He asked why investigations do not appear to be advancing in proportion to the gravity of the allegations. He also referenced the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which requires the Department of Justice and the FBI to disclose internal communications explaining prosecutorial decisions, why certain individuals were charged and others were not. According to Massie, those memos and emails have not been fully delivered to Congress. That absence is not trivial. Transparency laws exist precisely because prosecutorial discretion can otherwise remain opaque. If the public is to trust outcomes, it must understand how decisions were made. Massie then reached back to 2008, to the plea deal that allowed Epstein to avoid a far more severe outcome in what many legal observers considered an overwhelming case. That deal allowed Epstein to return to society and, as later allegations suggest, continue harming victims. The question Massie posed was direct. Who authorized that deal, and where are the internal records explaining that choice? The implication was clear. Justice delayed once led to greater harm. Justice delayed again risks compounding mistrust. But Massie did not stop with Epstein. He broadened his critique to what he described as a government under siege by lobbyists and corporate interests. He pointed to Bayer, the German corporation behind Roundup, alleging heavy lobbying efforts aimed at securing liability protections. He warned against granting immunity that would shield corporations from lawsuits, arguing that the Constitution guarantees citizens their day in court. The connective tissue in his argument was power. In both the Epstein case and the corporate immunity debate, Massie framed the issue as one of influence, whether powerful entities receive softer treatment than ordinary Americans. To be clear, raising questions is not the same as proving corruption. Due process matters. Investigations require evidence. Prosecutors operate within constraints the public may not see. However, perception matters too. When millions of pages are released but the visible enforcement footprint appears unchanged, the public begins to question whether the system functions equally for all. When transparency laws are passed, but key internal documents remain undisclosed, skepticism grows. Massie's speech tapped into that skepticism. He argued that justice should not be selective, that lobbying should not override constitutional guarantees, that powerful names should not automatically translate into prosecutorial hesitation. Whether one agrees with his tone or not, the political impact of his remarks is undeniable. He crystallized a sentiment that has been simmering for years, that accountability in high-profile cases often feels incomplete. The larger issue is institutional trust. The Department of Justice derives its legitimacy not merely from legal authority, but from public confidence that it applies the law without fear or favor. When that confidence weakens, every decision becomes suspect. Massie's speech was not a legal brief. It was a warning that unresolved questions do not disappear. They accumulate. And when they accumulate around issues involving exploitation, trafficking, and powerful elites, the political consequences extend far beyond a single hearing. The question now is not whether the Epstein files are disturbing. That is established. The question is whether investigative and prosecutorial actions will match the scale of what has been revealed. If additional charges are warranted, they must be pursued. If internal decisions were justified, they must be explained. Silence is no longer neutral, it is interpreted. In the end, Massie's message was straightforward. Do the work. Release the memos. Follow the evidence. Enforce the law evenly. Because when justice appears uneven, the damage extends beyond one case. It affects confidence in the entire system. If you believe powerful individuals should be investigated with the same rigor as anyone else, if you think transparency laws should actually produce transparency, and if you want political analysis that examines institutions critically but responsibly, like the video, subscribe for deeper breakdowns and tell me in the comments, is this a matter of patience or a matter of pressure? Because in cases like this, public trust is the real verdict on trial.